In the gleaming halls of Quantum Dynamics, the world's leading technology company, a man in a gray jumpsuit pushed a cleaning cart, his movements deliberate and unobtrusive. To the bustling employees rushing past, he was invisible, just another part of the background, like the potted plants or the abstract art adorning the walls. But there was more to James Chen than met the eye. Much more. As he maneuvered his cart around a corner, narrowly avoiding a collision with a harried-looking executive, James's keen eyes took in every detail of his surroundings. The security camera's blind spots, the keycard access points, the nervous glances of certain employees. Nothing escaped his notice. It had been 6 months since James had taken on this role, embedding himself in the very heart of quantum dynamics. 6 months of scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, and emptying trash cans. 6 months of being overlooked, ignored, and sometimes even sneered at by the company's elite. And it had all gone according to plan. As James made his way to the 47th floor, executive territory, he reflected on the circuitous path that had led him here. A child prodigy turned MIT graduate at 19, he had been recruited by a clandestine government agency before he could even legally drink. For years, he had served his country in the shadows, his brilliant mind and exceptional skills put to use in ways that would never see the light of day. But that was all in the past, or so he had thought. Now at 35, James found himself once again in the world of secrets and subterfuge. But this time, the stakes were even higher. As he stepped out of the elevator onto the 47th floor, James nodded politely to the executive assistant seated at the reception desk. She barely glanced up, her eyes fixed on her computer screen. James allowed himself a small, wry smile. Invisibility had its advantages. He made his way down the corridor, his practiced ear catching snippets of conversation from behind closed doors. The prototype should be ready by next week. Concerns about the ethical implications, if this falls into the wrong hands. James's pulse quickened. He was getting close. At the end of the hall stood an imposing door of dark, polished wood. The nameplate read, Dr. Victoria Reeves, Chief Technology Officer. James paused, ostensibly to adjust something on his cart. In reality, he was scanning the area, making sure he was alone. Satisfied, he pulled out a keycard from a hidden pocket in his jumpsuit. It was a perfect replica of Dr. Reeves's access card, created from data he had skimmed over weeks of careful observation. He held his breath as he swiped it through the reader. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the door unlocked. James pushed his cart inside, his eyes immediately drawn to the sleek computer on Dr. Reeves's desk. This was it, the culmination of months of planning and preparation. As he booted up the computer, bypassing the security protocols with ease, James couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. Dr. Reeves had always been kind to him, one of the few executives who bothered to learn his name and thank him for his work. But he had a job to do, and the fate of millions hung in the balance. The computer came to life, and James's fingers flew over the keyboard. He had mere minutes to find what he needed and get out before anyone noticed. Suddenly, a voice from behind him made him freeze. I must say, James, I'm impressed, though I suppose I shouldn't be, given your background. Slowly, James turned around. Dr. Victoria Reeves stood in the doorway, a bemused expression on her face. And she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a man James had only seen in classified files, the director of the very agency he had once served. James's mind raced. How had they known? Where had he slipped up? Dr. Reeves stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Don't look so surprised, James, or should I say Agent Chen? Did you really think we'd let someone with your skills slip through the cracks? The director spoke up, his voice gruff but not unkind. We've been watching you, son. Ever since you left the agency, we knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried to recruit you for less than savory purposes. James's shoulders sagged. He had been outplayed, and he knew it. So what now? He asked, resigned to his fate. Dr. Reeves smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. Now, James, we have a proposition for you, one that I think you'll find intriguing. As James listened to their offer, his mind whirled with possibilities. He had entered this room thinking he was about to change the world. He just hadn't realized how right he was. The tension in Dr. Reeves's office was palpable as James absorbed the implications of what he had just heard. The director, a man known only as Thompson, leaned against the wall, his weathered face unreadable. Dr. Reeves perched on the edge of her desk, her piercing gaze fixed on James. "Let me get this straight," James said slowly, his mind still reeling. "You're saying that quantum dynamics is actually a front for a global peacekeeping organization, and that the technology you're developing here could either save the world or destroy it?" Dr. Reeves finished for him. "Precisely." James ran a hand through his hair, his carefully maintained facade of the unassuming janitor crumbling. "And you want me to what? Join your secret club?" Thompson chuckled, a dry sound devoid of humor. "It's a bit more complicated than that, son. We need your expertise, yes, but more importantly, we need your unique perspective." "Perspective?" James echoed, confused. Dr. Reeves stood, pacing the room as she spoke. "James, in the months you've worked here, you've seen this company from an angle none of us could. You've heard conversations, observed interactions, noticed patterns that would be invisible to anyone else. We need that insight." James's mind flashed back to all the little details he had filed away over the past 6 months. The nervous engineer who always worked late, the hushed arguments between executives that ceased the moment anyone else approached, the subtle changes in security protocols that no one had announced. "You think there's a mole?" he said, realization dawning. Thompson nodded grimly. "We know there is. Someone has been feeding information about our most sensitive projects to a group that would use our technology for less than altruistic purposes. We've tried to identify the leak, but you're too close to it," James finished. "You can't see the forest for the trees." "Exactly," Dr. Reeves said, a note of approval in her voice. "We need someone who can move through this company unnoticed, someone with the skills to uncover the truth without alerting our enemies." James leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Part of him, the part that had relished the challenge of his old life, was already formulating plans, identifying potential leads. But another part, the part that had sought peace and anonymity for the past 5 years, hesitated. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. Thompson and Dr. Reeves exchanged a glance. It was Thompson who answered, his voice grave. "Then we'll have no choice but to let you walk out that door. Your service record speaks for itself, James. We won't force you into this, but..." He paused, his eyes boring into James's. "Can you really walk away knowing what's at stake?" James closed his eyes, memories washing over him. The thrill of outsmarting an opponent, the satisfaction of unraveling a complex puzzle, the weight of knowing that his actions could change the course of history. He opened his eyes, decision made. "What do you need me to do?" Dr. Reeves smiled, relief evident on her face. "For now, keep being the invisible man, but we'll be in touch, and James..." Her expression turned serious. "Trust no one, not even us. The fate of the world may depend on it." As James left the office, his mind buzzing with newfound purpose, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped onto a path from which there was no return. Little did he know just how right he was. The next few weeks passed in a blur for James. On the surface, nothing had changed. He still pushed his cleaning cart through the halls of quantum dynamics, still scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans. But beneath the mundane exterior, his mind was working overtime. Every conversation overheard, every document glimpsed, every unusual behavior noted, all of it was filed away in James's eidetic memory, pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. It was on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after his confrontation with Dr. Reeves and Thompson, that James noticed something odd. He was cleaning the break room on the 39th floor, R&D territory, when he overheard a heated whisper from around the corner. "Can't keep stalling them forever. They're getting impatient." James froze, his heart racing. He recognized that voice. It belonged to Dr. Elliot Fraser, one of the lead researchers on Project Prometheus, quantum dynamics' most secretive undertaking. A second voice responded, low and urgent. "I'm working on it. But rushing could blow our cover. We need to be patient." James's blood ran cold. He knew that voice too. Sarah Lindstrom, head of cybersecurity. Before he could hear more, the voices moved away, leaving James alone with his thundering pulse and a mind full of questions. That night, in the safety of his sparse apartment, James pored over everything he knew about Fraser and Lindstrom. Both were brilliant in their fields. Both had been with the company for years. Both had access to some of quantum dynamics' most closely guarded secrets. And now, it seemed, both were involved in something that went far beyond their official duties. James knew he should report this to Dr. Reeves immediately, but something held him back. "Trust no one," she had said, "not even us." Instead, he decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, James shadowed Fraser and Lindstrom as much as he dared. He noted their routines, their habits, the people they interacted with. He even managed to accidentally bump into Lindstrom, using the brief moment of contact to plant a tiny listening device on her jacket. It was a risk, but one James felt was necessary. The stakes were too high to play it safe. His vigilance paid off a week later. As he was mopping the floor near Fraser's lab late one night, his earpiece crackled to life. Lindstrom's voice came through, tense and quiet. "Meeting is set. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m., the usual place." James's heart raced. This was it, the break he had been waiting for. The next evening, long after most employees had gone home, James found himself crouched in the shadows of a deserted parking garage, 3 blocks from quantum dynamics. He had ditched his janitor's uniform for dark, nondescript clothing that helped him blend into the night. At precisely 10 p.m., a sleek black car pulled into the garage. James held his breath as Fraser and Lindstrom stepped out, looking nervously around before making their way to a dimly lit corner. James crept closer, straining to hear their conversation. But before Fraser or Lindstrom could speak, a third figure emerged from the shadows. James had to stifle a gasp. It was Thompson, the director himself. "Report," Thompson barked, his voice echoing in the empty garage. Fraser spoke first, his voice shaky. "We've made progress on Project Prometheus. The quantum entanglement process is stable, but..." "But what?" Thompson snapped. Lindstrom stepped in. "But we're concerned about the potential applications. Sir, if this technology falls into the wrong hands..." Thompson waved a hand dismissively. "That's not your concern. Your job is to get results. Leave the rest to me." As the conversation continued, James felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a meeting of traitors. This was something far more complex and potentially far more dangerous. He had stumbled upon a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. But who was really pulling the strings? And where did Dr. Reeves fit into all of this? As James slipped away from the garage, his mind whirling with new questions, one thing became clear. He was in way over his head. But there was no turning back now. The fate of Project Prometheus, and possibly the world, hung in the balance. And James Chen, the Invisible Man, might be the only one who could unravel the truth. The following days were a blur of activity for James. By day, he maintained his cover as the unassuming janitor, ears always open for any snippet of conversation that might shed light on the growing mystery. By night, he pored over the information he had gathered, trying to connect the dots. Project Prometheus, he had learned, was more than just a technological marvel. It was a quantum leap in computing power, one that could revolutionize everything from medical research to global communications. But in the wrong hands, it could also be weaponized, creating an unprecedented threat to global security. James couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. Thompson's involvement complicated matters significantly. Was the director a rogue agent, working against the very organization he was meant to protect? Or was there an even deeper game at play? It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon, as James was emptying trash bins in the HR department, that he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. Chen's background check came back. "It's interesting." James froze, his heart pounding. He recognized the voice as belonging to Melissa Yates, the head of HR. A second voice responded, "Dr. Reeves." "Interesting how?" "Well, for one thing, his MIT records are impeccable. Too impeccable, if you ask me. And there's a 5-year gap in his employment history that I can't account for." There was a pause before Dr. Reeves spoke again, her voice tight. "I see. Thank you, Melissa. I'll look into it personally." James barely managed to duck around a corner before Dr. Reeves emerged from the office, her face a mask of concern. As soon as she was gone, he slipped away, his mind racing. His cover was blown. Or at the very least, it was about to be. He needed to act fast. That night, James made a decision. It was time to bring in outside help. He still had one contact from his old life, someone he trusted implicitly. someone who might be able to make sense of the tangled web he found himself in. In a secluded corner of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, James waited nervously. At precisely midnight, a woman slid into the booth across from him. Her hair was a different color, and she wore glasses now, but James would recognize Anna Volkov anywhere. "You look like hell, James," Anna said by way of greeting, her Russian accent barely noticeable after years in the States. James managed a weak smile. "Good to see you too, Anna." Over the next hour, James laid out everything he had discovered: the true nature of quantum dynamics, Project Prometheus, the clandestine meeting in the parking garage, and his own precarious position. Anna listened intently, her sharp mind obviously working through the implications. When James finished, she sat back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "This is bigger than you realize, James," she said finally. "Project Prometheus. I've heard whispers about something like this. There are powerful people who would kill to get their hands on that technology. But what's Thompson's angle?" James pressed. "And where does Dr. Reeves fit into all this?" Anna shook her head. "I don't know, but I can do some digging. I still have contacts in places your average person doesn't even know exist." James nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Anna. I owe you." Anna's expression softened slightly. "Just be careful, James. You're playing a dangerous game, and if half of what you've told me is true, the stakes are higher than either of us can imagine." As they parted ways, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He took a circuitous route back to his apartment, using every counter-surveillance technique he knew. But it wasn't enough. As he turned the key in his lock, James sensed something was wrong. The air felt different, charged with an invisible tension. His instincts, honed by years of covert operations, screamed danger. He pushed the door open slowly, his body tense and ready for action. The apartment was dark, but James could make out a silhouette seated in his favorite armchair. "Hello, James," said a familiar voice. Or should I say, Agent Chen? James's hand instinctively moved towards the concealed weapon at his ankle, but he froze as the light suddenly flickered on. Dr. Victoria Reeves sat before him, her expression unreadable. "I wouldn't if I were you," she said calmly, nodding towards his hand. "We have a lot to discuss, and I'd prefer to do it without any unnecessary violence." James straightened, his mind racing. "How did you find out?" Dr. Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're good, James. Very good. But I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when someone of your caliber suddenly appeared on my radar?" She gestured for him to sit. Warily, James complied, perching on the edge of his couch. "So what now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Dr. Reeves leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. "Now, you tell me everything, starting with your meeting with Anna Volkov." James's blood ran cold. They had been watching him far more closely than he had realized. "Before I say anything," James said carefully, "I need to know where you stand in all this. What's your role in Project Prometheus? And what's Thompson's game?" For a long moment, Dr. Reeves was silent, studying James with an intensity that made him want to squirm. Finally, she spoke. "Project Prometheus isn't just a technological breakthrough, James. It's a turning point in human history. The power it offers, it could reshape the world as we know it, for better or for worse." She stood, pacing the small living room. "Thompson believes he can control it, harness its power for what he sees as the greater good. But power like that, it corrupts. You know that better than most." James nodded slowly, pieces starting to fall into place. "And you? What do you believe?" Dr. Reeves stopped pacing, turning to face him. "I believe that kind of power shouldn't be in anyone's hands. Not mine, not Thompson's, not any government or organization. The potential for abuse is too great." "So you want to destroy it," James said, realization dawning. "No," Dr. Reeves shook her head. "Destroying it isn't enough. The knowledge, the potential would still exist. We need to ensure it can never be recreated." James leaned back, his mind whirling. "That's why you recruited me. You need someone who can not only infiltrate the project, but understand it well enough to dismantle it from the inside." Dr. Reeves nodded, a hint of approval in her eyes. "Exactly. But it's not that simple. Thompson has his own operatives embedded throughout quantum dynamics. We're in a race against time, and right now, we're losing." James stood, moving to the window. He gazed out at the city lights, weighing his options. Finally, he turned back to Dr. Reeves. "All right," he said. "I'm in, but we do this my way. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas, full transparency from here on out." Dr. Reeves hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed. But James," her voice turned hard, "if you betray me, if you're playing your own angle here, I'll make sure you disappear so thoroughly that even your old agency won't be able to find you. Are we clear?" James met her gaze steadily. Crystal. As Dr. Reeves left his apartment, James sank onto his couch, his mind reeling. He had just aligned himself with one of the most powerful and dangerous women in the world, against an opponent with seemingly limitless resources. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than ever. And James Chen, the Invisible Man, was now at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape the very fabric of society. As he began to plan his next move, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, and he would need every ounce of his skill, intelligence, and courage to see it through. Little did he know, forces were already in motion that would test him in ways he could never have imagined. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for James. With Dr. Reeves's backing, he now had access to areas of quantum dynamics he'd never dreamed of entering. But with this new level of clearance came new dangers. James found himself walking a tightrope, balancing his cover as the unassuming janitor with his covert mission to understand and ultimately neutralize Project Prometheus. Every day brought new challenges, new pieces to the ever-expanding puzzle. It was during one of his late-night forays into the heart of the project that James made a startling discovery. Hidden deep within the code of Project Prometheus was a backdoor, a secret pathway that would allow someone to access and control the system remotely. James's heart raced as he carefully traced the backdoor's origin. It led him through a maze of encrypted servers and ghost protocols, each layer more complex than the last. Finally, after hours of painstaking work, he found what he was looking for. The backdoor hadn't been created by Thompson or any of his suspected operatives. It bore the unmistakable signature of Dr. Elliot Fraser. James sat back, his mind reeling. Fraser, the brilliant but seemingly nervous researcher he'd overheard in the parking garage, was playing a far more complex game than anyone had realized. As dawn broke, James made his way to Dr. Reeves's office, his discovery burning a hole in his pocket. But as he approached her door, he heard raised voices from within. "Can't keep stalling, Victoria. The board is getting restless. They want results." James froze. It was Thompson's voice, tense and angry. "I'm well aware of the board's concerns, Jack," Dr. Reeves replied, her tone icy. "But rushing this could be catastrophic. We need more time." "Time is a luxury we don't have," Thompson snapped. "Our competitors are breathing down our necks. If we don't deliver soon, everything we've worked for could be for nothing." There was a pause. Then Thompson spoke again, his voice lower but no less intense. "Don't make me go over your head on this, Victoria. You know I have the authority." "Is that a threat, Jack?" "It's a reality check. Get Prometheus operational, or I'll find someone who will." James barely had time to duck into a nearby supply closet before the door burst open and Thompson stormed out, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Once the coast was clear, James slipped into Dr. Reeves's office. She was standing by the window, her posture rigid with tension. "We have a problem," James said without preamble. Dr. Reeves turned, her eyes sharp. "I'm aware. Thompson is—" "Not Thompson," James cut her off. "Fraser." Over the next hour, James laid out everything he'd discovered about the back door in Project Prometheus. Dr. Reeves listened intently, her expression growing more troubled with each passing minute. "This changes everything," she said finally. "If Fraser has built in a way to control Prometheus remotely, he could sell access to the highest bidder," James finished, "or use it himself to become the most powerful person in the world." Dr. Reeves nodded grimly. "We need to move fast. James, I need you to get closer to Fraser. Find out who he's working for, what his endgame is. And if he discovers who I really am—" Dr. Reeves's eyes met his, her gaze steely. "Then you do whatever is necessary to protect the mission." "Whatever is necessary, James. Are we clear?" James nodded, a chill running down his spine. He'd just been given license to eliminate a potential threat. The Invisible Man was now a potential assassin. As he left Dr. Reeves's office, James's mind was already formulating a plan. He would need to create a persona that would attract Fraser's attention, someone the researcher would want to confide in. It was time for James Chen, the unassuming janitor, to disappear. In his place would emerge someone new, someone with the skills and knowledge to penetrate Fraser's defenses and uncover the truth behind Project Prometheus. But as James began his transformation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The game was changing, the players shifting, and he was caught in the middle of a quantum gambit where the stakes were nothing less than the future of humanity itself. Little did James know, his greatest challenge was yet to come. For in the shadows, watching and waiting, was a player he hadn't even considered. Someone who had been pulling the strings all along, orchestrating a plan so vast and complex that it would shake the very foundations of reality. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. James Chen, the undercover genius, was about to face the greatest test of his life. And the outcome would determine the future of humanity for generations to come. James Chen stood before the mirror, hardly recognizing the man staring back at him. Gone was the unassuming janitor with hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. In his place stood Dr. James Chen, theoretical physicist and newest member of the Prometheus team. The transformation had been Dr. Reeves's idea. With her influence, creating a new identity for James within quantum dynamics had been surprisingly easy. Too easy, a part of James's mind whispered. But he pushed the thought aside. There wasn't time for doubt. As James made his way through the now familiar halls of quantum dynamics, he could feel the difference in how people looked at him. No longer invisible, he was now the subject of curious glances and respectful nods. It was a stark reminder of how appearances could shape reality. His first stop was Dr. Fraser's lab. As he entered, he found the researcher hunched over a complex array of quantum processors, muttering to himself. "Excuse me, Dr. Fraser?" James said, adopting the slightly nervous tone of a new employee. "I'm Dr. James Chen. I've been assigned to your team." Fraser looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Chen? I wasn't informed of any new team members." James handed over a tablet with his credentials. It was a last-minute decision by Dr. Reeves. She felt you could use an extra pair of hands, especially given the pressure from above. At the mention of pressure, Fraser's expression darkened. "Yes, well, pressure seems to be the only constant around here lately." He gestured to a workstation. "You can start by analyzing these entanglement patterns. Let me know if you spot any anomalies." As James settled in, his mind was racing. He needed to gain Fraser's trust, to get close enough to uncover the truth about the back door. But he also couldn't help but be awed by the technology surrounding him. Project Prometheus was truly revolutionary, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible in quantum computing. Over the next few weeks, James threw himself into his work, impressing Fraser and the rest of the team with his insights and dedication. Slowly but surely, he began to earn Fraser's trust. It was late one night, when most of the team had gone home, that James finally saw his opportunity. Fraser was working late again, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. "Dr. Fraser," James said, approaching cautiously. "I've been going over the core algorithms, and I've noticed something unusual." Fraser's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly sharp. "Unusual how?" James took a deep breath. This was it. There seems to be a recursive loop in the quantum entanglement protocol. It's subtle, but it creates a potential access point that bypasses our security measures. For a long moment, Fraser said nothing, his eyes boring into James. Then, to James's surprise, he laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "I wondered how long it would take someone to notice," Fraser said, his voice low. "You're more observant than I gave you credit for, Dr. Chen. Or should I say Agent Chen?" James felt his blood run cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Fraser stood, moving to a locked cabinet. "Oh, I think you do. The question is, who are you really working for? Reeves, Thompson, or someone else entirely?" As Fraser turned back to face him, James saw that he was holding a small device, unlike anything he'd ever seen before. It hummed with an otherworldly energy. "You see, James," Fraser continued, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone, "Project Prometheus isn't just about quantum computing. It's about something far more profound, something that will change the very nature of reality itself. James tensed, ready for action. What are you talking about? Fraser's eyes gleamed with a fervor that bordered on madness. Parallel universes, James. Prometheus isn't just a computer. It's a gateway, a means to pierce the quantum veil and access the multiverse. As the implications of Fraser's words sank in, James felt the world tilt on its axis. If what Fraser was saying was true, the stakes were even higher than he'd imagined. Why are you telling me this? James asked, buying time as he assessed his options. Fraser smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because, James, in a few moments, it won't matter. You see this device in my hand? It's a quantum stabilizer. And right now, it's the only thing keeping this reality stable. With a flick of his wrist, Fraser activated the device. The air around them seemed to ripple, like heat waves on a summer day. I'm sorry it had to come to this, James, Fraser said, his voice distorting strangely. But the truth is, you're not the first James Chen I've encountered. And in every reality, you always get too close to the truth. As the world around him began to dissolve, James lunged for Fraser, but his hands passed right through the scientist, as if he were made of smoke. The last thing James saw before everything went black was Fraser's face, twisted in a mix of triumph and regret. Welcome to the multiverse, James Chen. Let's see if you can find your way home. And with that, James felt himself falling, tumbling through an endless void of possibilities. The invisible man had become truly invisible, lost in the quantum foam of parallel realities. The game had changed once again, and this time, the very fabric of reality was at stake. Chapter 7, Echoes of Infinity. James Chen was falling, or floating, or possibly both at the same time. In the swirling chaos of the quantum void, such distinctions seemed meaningless. Colors he had no names for flashed past him. Realities flickered in and out of existence like soap bubbles, each one a window into a different version of the world he knew. In one, he saw himself as a celebrated scientist accepting a Nobel Prize. In another, he was a homeless man, huddled in a dark alley. Countless variations of James Chen, each living out a different path, a different choice. Just as James felt his sanity beginning to slip away in the face of this infinite parade of possibilities, he felt something solid beneath his feet. The kaleidoscope of realities faded, resolving into his apartment? But not quite. Everything was slightly off. The furniture was arranged differently, the colors were wrong, and on the wall hung a photo of James with a woman he'd never seen before, both of them smiling widely. Before James could process this, the door burst open. Dr. Reeves rushed in, but not the Dr. Reeves he knew. This version was younger, her hair streaked with vibrant blue, a wild look in her eyes. James, thank God you're here. We don't have much time. She grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the door. Wait, James said, his head spinning. What's going on? Where am I? Dr. Reeves, or this version of her, looked at him sharply. You're not my James, are you? Fraser's done it again, hasn't he? Damn him! A loud explosion rocked the building, sending plaster raining down from the ceiling. Look, not quite, Reeves said urgently. I know you're confused, but right now we need to move. I promise I'll explain everything. But first, we need to get to safety. Another explosion, closer this time, made the decision for James. He nodded, allowing this alternate Dr. Reeves to lead him out of the apartment and down a fire escape he didn't remember existing in his own reality. As they raced through streets that were both familiar and alien, James's mind whirled with questions. But one thing was clear. Whatever version of reality this was, it was in serious trouble. They finally came to a stop in front of what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Dr. Reeves placed her hand on a seemingly ordinary brick, and a hidden door slid open. Welcome to Resistance HQ, she said, ushering James inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the dilapidated exterior. Banks of advanced computers lined the walls, and people hurried about with purposeful urgency. James recognized some faces, alternate versions of his colleagues from quantum dynamics, but others were completely unfamiliar. Dr. Reeves led him to a quiet corner and handed him a cup of something that smelled like coffee but shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence. Quantum coffee, she explained, noticing his hesitation. Helps stabilize interdimensional travelers. Drink up. As James sipped the strange brew, feeling an immediate clarity sweep through him, Dr. Reeves began to explain. In this reality, Fraser succeeded. He used Project Prometheus to tear open the barriers between dimensions, thinking he could cherry-pick the best aspects of each reality to create a perfect world. Instead, he unleashed chaos. She gestured to a large screen showing scenes of devastation from around the world. Cities warped by impossible geometries, people phasing in and out of existence, laws of physics breaking down in real time. "We're fighting a war on two fronts," Dr. Reeves continued. "Against Fraser and his loyalists, who still believe they can control this, and against the breakdown of reality itself." James absorbed this, his analytical mind already racing ahead. "And how do I fit into this? Why did your James leave?" A shadow passed over Dr. Reeves's face. Our James? He found a way to navigate between realities. He thought he could find a universe where none of this had happened, bring back the solution. But he never returned. She fixed James with an intense gaze. "Until now. You might not be our James, but you have his mind, his skills. We need you, James. All of reality needs you." Before James could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. A young woman rushed up to them, her face pale with fear. "Dr. Reeves, we've detected a massive quantum surge. Fraser's making his move." Dr. Reeves cursed under her breath. "He's trying to collapse all realities into one he can control." "James, I know this isn't your fight, but—" "I'm in," James said, surprising himself with his own certainty. "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded Dr. Reeves's face. "We have a plan, but it's risky. We need to get you into Fraser's facility. You're the only one who might be able to reverse what he's done." As they rushed to prep him for the mission, outfitting him with gear that looked like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie, James's mind was racing. He thought of his own reality, of the Dr. Reeves he knew, of the invisible man he had been. Had that all been preparation for this moment? As he stepped onto the quantum portal platform, ready to be sent into the heart of Fraser's stronghold, James felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, he was no longer invisible. He was exactly where he needed to be. "Good luck, James," Dr. Reeves said, her hand hovering over the activation switch. "The fate of all realities rests in your hands." With a nod, James braced himself. The air around him began to shimmer and distort. And then, once again, James Chen stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Little did he know, his greatest challenge and his greatest revelation was yet to come. The world rematerialized around James in a swirl of quantum particles. He found himself in what appeared to be the control room of Fraser's facility. A vast chamber dominated by a massive, pulsating orb of energy that he instinctively knew was the heart of Project Prometheus. Alarms blared, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. Holographic displays showed multiple realities colliding, merging, and tearing apart in real time. And there, standing before the swirling vortex of quantum energy, was Dr. Elliot Fraser. But not the nervous, seemingly innocuous researcher James had known. This Fraser radiated power and madness in equal measure, his eyes gleaming with the light of 1,000 realities. "Ah, James Chen," Fraser said, turning to face him. "Or should I say James Chen's? I must admit, I'm impressed. No matter how many realities I collapse, you always seem to find your way here." James's mind raced, processing the implications of Fraser's words. "You've done this before," he realized aloud. "Multiple times." Fraser smiled, a cold, empty expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Countless times across countless realities. It's always you, James, the invisible man who becomes the linchpin of destiny. But this time, this reality, it will be different. This time, I will succeed." He gestured to the swirling vortex behind him. "Behold the culmination of Project Prometheus, the power to reshape reality itself, to create a perfect world, free from suffering, from want, from the chaotic whims of chance and circumstance. At the cost of free will," James countered, taking a cautious step forward. "At the cost of everything that makes us human." Fraser's face twisted in anger. "And what has humanity's precious free will brought us? War, poverty, destruction. I'm offering salvation, James. Why can't you see that?" As they argued, James was keenly aware of the device in his pocket, the quantum disruptor Dr. Reeves had given him. One press of a button, and it would unleash an energy pulse designed to destabilize Prometheus and bring the whole operation crashing down. But something held him back. A nagging doubt, a sense that there was more to this story than he yet understood. If your intentions are so noble, James said carefully, why all the secrecy? Why the back doors and the clandestine meetings? For a moment, Fraser's mask of confidence slipped, revealing a flicker of the man James had first met. Brilliant, yes, but also deeply afraid. Because they wouldn't understand, Fraser said, his voice low. Reeves, Thompson, the board, they're too limited in their thinking. They can't see the bigger picture. And what picture is that? James pressed, sensing he was close to a crucial revelation. Fraser hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. With a wave of his hand, the holographic displays shifted, showing a timeline that branched and reconnected in impossible ways. This isn't just about our reality, James. It's about all realities. In every timeline, in every universe, humanity is approaching a critical juncture, a point of no return. The displays showed scenes of global catastrophe, climate collapse, nuclear war, artificial intelligence run amok. In 99.9% of all possible futures, Fraser continued, his voice heavy, humanity doesn't survive the next century. Project Prometheus isn't just about creating a perfect world. It's about ensuring there's a world left to perfect. James felt the weight of this revelation settle over him. If what Fraser was saying was true, the stakes were even higher than he'd imagined. But why you? James asked. Why do you get to decide the fate of all realities? Fraser's laugh was bitter. Why me? Because someone has to, James. Because I'm the only one who can see the full picture. The only one willing to make the hard choices. As Fraser spoke, James's hand inched towards the quantum disruptor. One press, and all of this would end. But could he take that risk? Could he condemn countless realities to potential destruction based on his own limited understanding? In that moment of hesitation, Fraser's eyes locked onto James's pocket. Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by rage. So that's why you're here, Fraser snarled. To destroy everything I've worked for. I should have known Reeves would find a way to interfere, even across realities. The air crackled with energy as Fraser raised his hand, quantum forces gathering at his fingertips. I'm sorry, James, but I can't let you stop this. There's too much at stake. As Fraser unleashed a blast of pure quantum energy, James dove to the side, his hand closing around the disruptor. Time seemed to slow as he rolled to his feet, thumb hovering over the activation button. In that frozen moment, James Chen, the invisible man, the undercover genius, the linchpin of destiny, faced the most important decision of his life. A decision that would echo across all realities. Destroy Project Prometheus and potentially doom countless worlds? Or let Fraser's plan unfold and risk the loss of everything that made humanity what it was? The fate of all realities hung in the balance, and James Chen had to choose. Time crystallized around James as he stood poised between two impossible choices. The quantum disruptor felt heavy in his hand, its potential to unravel Fraser's work, and possibly reality itself, a tangible weight. Fraser stood frozen mid-attack, energy crackling around his outstretched hand. The vortex of Project Prometheus pulsed behind him, a silent promise of both salvation and damnation. In that eternal moment, James's mind raced. He thought of all the realities he had glimpsed, all the versions of himself and the people he knew. He thought of the Dr. Reeves who had sent him here, fighting desperately to save her world. And he thought of his own reality, of the invisible man he had been, always watching from the shadows. But most of all, he thought about choice. The fundamental human right to choose one's own path, for better or worse. The very thing Fraser's plan would eradicate in the name of a perfect world. And in that moment, James Chen made his choice. But it wasn't the choice Fraser expected, nor was it the one Dr. Reeves had sent him to make. Instead of activating the quantum disruptor, James tossed it aside. The device clattered to the floor, inert and harmless. Time lurched back into motion. Fraser's energy blast dissipated, his face a mask of confusion. "What are you doing?" Fraser demanded, his voice a mix of suspicion and hope. James took a deep breath, centering himself. "I'm choosing a third option," he said calmly. "You're right about the stakes, Fraser, but you're wrong about the solution." He gestured to the swirling vortex of Prometheus. "This power, it's too much for any one person to wield. Even with the best intentions, you can't possibly account for all the variables, all the unintended consequences." Fraser's face darkened. "So you doom countless realities to destruction? I thought you were smarter than that, James. No, James said, taking a step forward. I'm proposing we work together, not to control reality, but to guide it, to give humanity the tools to save itself across all realities. Fraser's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? James's mind was racing, piecing together a plan even as he spoke. Project Prometheus has given us insight into the multiverse. Instead of using that power to forcibly reshape reality, we can use it to communicate across realities, to share knowledge, to warn of impending disasters, to collaborate on solutions. He pointed to the displays showing timelines of global catastrophe. You've seen the threats humanity faces: climate change, nuclear war, rogue AI. But you've also seen realities where we overcome these challenges. What if we could connect those realities, create a network of knowledge and innovation spanning the multiverse? Fraser was silent for a long moment, his brilliant mind clearly grappling with the implications of James's proposal. It's an intriguing idea, he said finally. But how can we be sure it would be enough? The risks are too great to leave to chance. James smiled, a glimmer of his old confidence returning. That's where you and I come in. We use Prometheus to identify key inflection points across realities, moments where a small nudge could set a world on a better path. Then we provide that nudge, not by forcing change, but by ensuring the right information gets to the right people at the right time. As James spoke, he could see the idea taking hold in Fraser's mind. The madness in his eyes receded, replaced by the spark of scientific curiosity that had driven him to create Project Prometheus in the first place. A quantum information network spanning all realities, Fraser mused. It's audacious, possibly even more complex than my original plan. But it preserves free will, James finished. It gives humanity a fighting chance without taking away what makes us human. Fraser nodded slowly. It would require safeguards, protocols to prevent abuse, a way to ensure we don't create unintended consequences of our own. Agreed, James said. Which is why we need more than just the two of us. We need a team drawn from across realities, the best minds, the most ethical thinkers, a multiversal council to oversee Prometheus. As they discussed the details, the energy in the room shifted. The sense of impending doom faded, replaced by a tentative hope. The vortex of Prometheus seemed to pulse in rhythm with their words, as if the very fabric of reality was aligning with their new purpose. Hours passed as James and Fraser worked feverishly, reconfiguring Prometheus, establishing the first tenuous links between realities. They were so engrossed in their work that they almost didn't notice when a new figure materialized in the control room. Well, said a familiar voice, tinged with amusement, I certainly didn't expect this outcome. James and Fraser turned to see Dr. Victoria Reeves, not the younger, blue-haired version from the Resistance, but one who seemed to embody aspects of every Dr. Reeves across the multiverse. She smiled at their confused expressions. Did you really think you were the only ones playing the long game? Welcome to the real Project Prometheus, gentlemen. I think it's time we had a talk about the true nature of reality. As Dr. Reeves began to explain, James Chen, no longer the invisible man, no longer undercover, but finally, truly himself, realized that his journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. 1 year later, or perhaps an eternity, time being a fluid concept in the quantum realm, James Chen stood before the newly formed Multiversal Council. Representatives from countless realities, each an expert in their field, gathered to hear his report. Project Prometheus has exceeded our wildest expectations, James began, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. In the past year, we've established links with over 10,000 realities. We've prevented 3 global pandemics, averted 2 potential nuclear conflicts, and provided crucial data to help mitigate climate change across hundreds of worlds. A holographic display sprang to life behind him, showing a vast network of interconnected realities. Points of light pulsed along the connections, representing the constant flow of information and innovation. But our work is far from done, James continued. For every reality we help set on a better path, we discover dozens more in need of assistance. The challenges are immense, but so are the opportunities. As James concluded his presentation, he caught Dr. Reeves's eye from where she sat at the head of the council. She gave him a small nod of approval, a gesture that still filled him with a sense of pride. The true nature of Project Prometheus, as Dr. Reeves had revealed that day in Fraser's lab, was more profound than either James or Fraser had imagined. It wasn't just about saving humanity, but about guiding the very evolution of consciousness across the multiverse. Reeves, or rather, the multiversal collective she represented, had been orchestrating events across realities for eons. Prometheus was the next step in that grand design, a way to accelerate the growth and interconnectedness of all sentient life. James and Fraser, with their unique perspectives and skills, had been the key to unlocking Prometheus's true potential. Their ability to see beyond the immediate crisis, to find a third option where others saw only binary choices, had opened up possibilities that even the multiversal collective hadn't foreseen. As the council meeting adjourned, James found himself on one of the observation decks of the Quantum Hub, a structure that existed simultaneously in all connected realities. The view never failed to take his breath away. Countless worlds, countless possibilities, all interconnected in a vast, shimmering web. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Dr. Reeves said, joining him at the railing. "Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come." James nodded, his mind drifting back to his days as an unassuming janitor. "It's a long way from pushing a mop at quantum dynamics," he said with a wry smile. Dr. Reeves chuckled. "You were never just a janitor, James. Even then, you were shaping the course of reality. You just didn't know it yet." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the ebb and flow of quantum information across the multiverse. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," James said finally. "All those versions of me across different realities, the scientist, the homeless man, the countless others I glimpsed, were they all part of your plan?" Dr. Reeves turned to face him, her expression serious. "James, you need to understand something fundamental about the nature of reality and free will. Our collective didn't create those versions of you. We didn't dictate the paths of your life across realities. What we did was nudge. We created circumstances, opportunities, but the choices were always yours." She gestured to the vast expanse before them. "Every James Chen out there, in every reality, is the result of your choices, your inherent nature expressed through the lens of different circumstances. The homeless James chose to prioritize his principles over material success. The scientist James channeled his curiosity into academic pursuits. And you?" "I chose to be invisible," James finished, "to watch and learn from the shadows." Dr. Reeves nodded. "And that choice, that perspective, is what made you uniquely suited to see the bigger picture when the moment came, to find the third option that neither Fraser nor I had considered." James absorbed this, feeling a profound sense of both responsibility and liberation. Every choice mattered across all realities, but those choices were his own. "So what now?" he asked. "Where do we go from here?" Dr. Reeves smiled, a glimmer of excitement in her eyes. "Now we push further. There are still realms beyond our current understanding, layers of existence we've only begun to glimpse. The quantum network we've built is just the beginning." She turned back to the view, her voice taking on a tone of wonder. "Imagine, James, we've connected thousands of realities, shared knowledge across countless worlds. But what if there are entire multiverses out there, separate from our own? What if what we think of as reality is just one bubble in an infinite foam of existence?" James felt a familiar thrill of excitement and trepidation. The invisible man who had once been content to watch from the sidelines now stood at the forefront of the greatest adventure in the history of consciousness. "Well then, Dr. Reeves," he said, a smile playing at his lips, "I suppose we better get to work." As they turned to leave, ready to dive back into the challenges that awaited them, James cast one last look at the quantum web. Somewhere out there, countless versions of James Chen were living their lives, making their choices, shaping their realities in ways big and small. And here at the heart of it all, James Chen, no longer invisible, no longer undercover, but more himself than he had ever been, was ready to help write the next chapter in the grand story of existence. The adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. As the quantum hub hummed with activity, as minds across realities collaborated on problems once thought unsolvable, as the boundaries of knowledge and possibility expanded with each passing moment, one thing became clear: the tale of the undercover genius. of James Chen and his journey from invisible man to multiversal linchpin was more than just one man's story. It was a testament to the power of perspective, to the importance of looking beyond the obvious, and to the profound impact that a single choice made with courage and vision could have across all of reality. In every universe, in every timeline, there are invisible forces shaping the course of events. Sometimes, those forces are vast cosmic phenomena beyond our comprehension. And sometimes, they're as simple as a janitor, watching quietly from the shadows, waiting for the moment to step into the light and change everything. For in the end, we are all undercover geniuses, filled with untapped potential and unrealized possibilities. And in a multiverse of infinite variation, the only limits are those we place on ourselves.